If I'd known that opening one little envelope would flip my whole life upside down, I would have burned it before it ever touched my kitchen table.
The kitchen was quiet enough to hear the old clock ticking on the wall, ticking like it was counting down to something I wasn't ready for. The envelope sat in front of me, plain white, county seal, my name written in my son's neat handwriting as if he'd been proud to print it. My throat tightened, but I kept my face as still as stone. "You don't have to get upset," he said, using that calm, reasonable voice people use when they know you should be upset but they don't want to deal with the fallout. He sounded like a waiter explaining why they messed up my order, not like a man handing his mother an eviction notice. I didn't answer, not yet. My fingers brushed the edge of the envelope again, the paper crisp and new, nothing like the life worn into this house. Gerald stood near the counter, tall and polished, like some kind of businessman dropped into a place that no longer matched him. This was the same kitchen he once begged to paint bright yellow when he was 12. It came out blotchy, streaky, an absolute mess, but he'd been proud of it. And I'd let it stay. That was a lifetime ago. Now he wasn't a boy with paint on his elbows. He was a man with a county-stamped envelope and an SUV worth more than my whole retirement. "It's all official," he said, nodding toward the papers like he expected me to thank him for presenting them so neatly. He glanced out the window at his shiny black SUV, parked like some expensive shadow looming over the yard. I finally looked at him. Really looked. Gerald was 52 now, with silver threading through his hair in a way that made women look twice. His belt probably cost more than my monthly grocery run. His shoes looked like they'd never touched real ground, no dirt, no scrapes, no life. His mouth pinched when he saw my expression. Not guilt, not sadness. Just preparation, like he'd rehearsed this. "Why?" I asked. My voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry, just a question hanging in the air like smoke. He sighed long and heavy like I was the one being unreasonable. "Mom, you said yourself you've been having a harder time keeping up with the place. The stairs, the yard, it's a lot, and since we're moving, I cut in, he straightened up. To New Bern, bigger house, better school district for the boys. We want to use the proceeds from this house for the down payment. It just makes sense." Makes sense? Easy words when it wasn't your memories being boxed up. I looked around. The curtains I stitched by hand. The wooden table James built before his stroke. The shaky-legged chair Gerald used to lean back in during dinner even when I warned him it would tip. This wasn't just a house. This was the place I lost my husband. The place I raised my son. The place where every tile, every corner, every nail held a story that now meant nothing more than money to him. "You said I could live here as long as I wanted," I reminded him. "That was before," he said. "Before what?" "Before we knew how much it was worth." He stopped himself, fixing this sentence too late. "Before we realized how much you're struggling, Mom, we're trying to help. You shouldn't be living alone like this. It's not safe. There are assisted living communities." I raised my hand. I didn't need the brochure speech, the fake smile, the promise of independence inside a room the size of a walk-in closet with walls as beige as boredom. I turned and poured myself some tea even though my hands shook. I kept my movements slow so he wouldn't see. "You already made the decision," I said quietly, setting the cup down. "So why pretend to ask?" He stepped closer, earnest like he thought this pep talk would smooth things out. "Because I care," he said. "Because I wanted to be honest. You'll have a few weeks before the paperwork goes through. I'll help with the move." "The move," I repeated, tasting the word like something bitter. "Yes," he said firmly. "Just think it over, okay? Don't be mad." I looked at him, really looked. Not as the boy who brought me wilted dandelions on Mother's Day. Not as the young man who used to call me in a panic because he couldn't figure out his taxes. No. I looked at the man standing in my kitchen with legal documents in his hand and a plan that didn't involve me beyond what I was worth. "I'm not mad," I finally said. "Not yet." He took that as permission, another mistake, and gave me a small, relieved smile before heading toward the door. The lock clicked quietly behind him. I stayed still for a long time, fingers wrapped around the warm teacup, the envelope untouched on the table like a loaded gun no one wanted to admit was dangerous. Outside, the wind swept the last of the maple leaves across the yard. My knees ached when I shifted. My chest felt tight, but not from grief. At 79, you learn the difference between heartbreak and insult. Heartbreak, I knew that one already. It came when James died, when I slept on his side of the bed just so I didn't feel the emptiness as sharply. But this wasn't heartbreak. This was insult, sharp, clean, and delivered by the only person I never expected to wield the knife. The next morning, I folded the eviction notice in half, clean, sharp, deliberate, and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk. Not because I meant to ignore it. No, I wanted it there the way you tuck a loaded gun away. Close enough to reach, far enough not to stare at every second. I needed my kitchen table clear. I needed my head clear even more. Outside, a thick blanket of fog hugged the yard, slow and heavy, like it didn't want to let go of the night. The porch boards groaned under my weight. Old wood always tells the truth as I stepped out to grab the morning newspaper. Gerald had once painted that porch blue for my birthday. He was so proud of it. Now the paint was cracked, faded, beaten by weather and time, just like the memory. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and out of muscle memory set out 2 mugs, one for me, one for James. 8 years gone and I still couldn't bring myself to stop making room for him. Some habits are carved into the bones. The kettle whistled twice, each time a reminder that the world was still moving even if I wasn't. I took a bite of toast, but it tasted like cardboard. My body sat at the table, but my mind walked the hallways trying to find answers that didn't exist yet. Around noon, I finally opened the manila folder. I kept it tucked behind old tax returns and a warranty for a refrigerator long dead. The deed was still there, edges crisp, ink bold. His name was on it, not mine. I remembered the day he convinced me to sign it over. The lawyer's office had smelled like carpet glue and the air felt too cold. James had been gone only a few months. My grief was still raw, my energy drained. Forms, signatures, institutions, I'd been drowning in all of it. Gerald had said all the right things back then. It's just to avoid probate, Mom. Nothing changes. You'll always live here. And I'd believed him because he was my son, because I was tired, because trust came easier then. Now that trust could shove me right out my own front door. At 2:15 p.m., tires crunched across the gravel. I didn't need to look out the window to know who it was. My stomach tightened all on its own. She was here, Mallory. Gerald's wife, blonde, polished, and always moving like she had somewhere more important to be. Even her posture looked expensive. She stepped out of the passenger side, tall boots sinking awkwardly into the gravel. She spotted me on the porch and plastered on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Helen," she called, waving a manicured hand. "Thought I'd stop by, hope it's not a bad time." I didn't bother responding. I opened the screen door and let it slam shut behind me, louder than necessary. She followed me in without waiting to be invited. Typical. The scent of her perfume drifted into the hallway. Something expensive, icy, and absolutely wrong for a house like mine. "I know Gerald talked to you," she began, settling herself into the armchair like she'd been rehearsing this moment. "And I just wanted to say this isn't personal, isn't it?" I asked. She blinked but kept going, steamrolling right past my question. "This is about planning ahead, making sure you have the support you need. Assisted living has come a long way. There's a community in Raleigh with a salon, activities, even yoga classes. You'd absolutely love it." "Have you ever seen me do yoga?" I asked. She laughed lightly as if I were being cute. "The point is, you'd be safer there, and well, you've said yourself the house is getting hard to manage." I looked at her hands, smooth, perfect, not a callus or wrinkle in sight. Hands like that didn't know a day of real work. "I manage just fine," I said. "Still," her voice softened into that syrupy, patronizing tone she reserved for her mother. "This house is a lot, too many rooms, too many stairs, too many things that could go wrong. You'd be so much more comfortable in a place that's, modern." I leaned forward slightly. "Tell me the truth." She hesitated just a flicker, but it was enough. "This isn't about comfort," I said, "and it sure isn't about yoga. This is about money." Her perfectly lined lips twitched. "It's about opportunity. The market's strong right now. We could sell this place for a great price and roll the money into the new house before interest rates shoot up. Gerald's job is, well, it's not as stable as it used to be, and the boys need better schools. You could help everyone by disappearing quietly," I finished. She didn't deny it. There it was, truth laid out, polished and cold. "I baked today," I said suddenly. "Cranberry scones, the boys used to love them." She blinked, thrown off, but I stood anyway and brought her the plate. They were still warm. She took one, out of politeness more than desire, and nibbled it like it might bite her back. Still delicious, she said, though her tone suggested she wished she were eating anything else. I sat across from her. I want you to tell Gerald something. Tell him not to come back here waving more paperwork at me. If he wants to talk, he can talk. Not serve legal notices like I'm a tenant. I'm his mother. Mallory set the scone down. Helen, I trusted him, I continued. I handed over this house believing his promises, and now he wants to trade me in like a cheap piece of furniture. She shifted in her seat, uncomfortable for the first time since she arrived. I think that's a bit harsh. I nodded. You would. She stood, smoothing down her coat. The polite smile was gone now, peeled away, leaving only impatience beneath. I'll tell Gerald you want a conversation, she said. But I really hope you'll think about what's best for your future. I am thinking about it, I said, probably for the first time in a long while. She left without finishing her scone. When the SUV disappeared down the road, I wrapped the remaining pastries and tucked them into the freezer. Waste not. Then I pulled out a fresh notepad. Clean page, clean lines, no lies on it yet. At the top I wrote, people I can call who still know who I am. And then slowly I started a list. I didn't sleep much. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe, creaks in the walls, faint hum of the heater, the soft sigh of wind pressing against the shutters. All of it felt too intentional, like the house itself knew something was shifting under my feet. Around 4 a.m, I finally gave up on sleep. I slipped into my robe, tied it tight, and padded through the hallway. The floorboards groaned the way old bones do. The heater clicked on with a low rumble. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters just hard enough to remind me the world wasn't asleep, even if it was dark. In the living room, the fireplace sat cold but familiar. I settled into the armchair across from it. James used to stack the wood himself, taking his sweet time to get the angles just right. He'd lean back, hands on his hips, and smile when the flames caught. There it is, he'd say, the honest kind of heat. Sitting there, I kept thinking about him. James wouldn't have raised his voice. That wasn't his way. But the anger he carried when disappointed, that quiet, cold kind, was something you didn't forget. And he would have been furious with what Gerald had done. We bought this place together in 1974. It wasn't much then, peeling paint, sagging porch, and pipes that clanked like they were haunted, but it had promise. We spent one Carolina summer rebuilding the porch side by side. Sunburnt forearms, lemonade breaks, bad jokes, and arguments about where the railings should go. Those boards beneath my feet still carried the ghost of our laughter. This house watched us grow up, raise Gerald, bury James. It held everything I'd ever known as mine. And I'd signed it away, not because I was careless, but because grief fogs the mind. When James passed, I was drowning in paperwork and loneliness. Gerald had stepped in, helpful and steady, or so I thought. When he'd said the deed needed to be in his name to make things easier down the line, I hadn't fought him. I trusted him, and that trust had teeth. I stood and walked to the bedroom closet. My safe sat tucked behind winter coats and a dusty box of Christmas lights. I spun the dial, 11 minutes 21 minutes 55, our anniversary. Even now, my fingers remembered it better than my head did. Inside the safe were layers of our life, birth certificates, tax papers, James's discharge letter, our mortgage documents, and finally, the deed transfer. My name signed neatly at the bottom, Gerald's name standing alone like a declaration. I stared at the signature, my signature, the moment I'd sealed my own vulnerability. I closed the safe, grabbed the landline, and dialed the number I'd scribbled years ago on a sticky note. It was 8:07 a.m. when a chipper voice answered. Good morning, this is Rachel with Fenton and Brock Legal Services. How may I assist you today? Too cheerful for that hour, but I didn't have time for niceties. Rachel, I need to speak with someone about property rights and tenancy agreements. Are you an existing client? No, I said, but my husband, James Kirkwood, did our taxes with your firm for years. She hesitated, checking something no doubt, then transferred me. A woman named Diane picked up. Her voice was older, weathered in a good way, like someone who'd lived long enough to cut through nonsense. I explained everything, the deed, the transfer, the eviction notice, my age, my son's shiny new plans that didn't include me. She didn't interrupt, didn't rush me, just listened. When I finished, she exhaled softly. Mrs. Kirkwood, I'm sorry you're going through this, and let me just say you may have more rights than you realize. North Carolina law includes protections for seniors facing coercion or undue influence. I signed it willingly, I said quietly. I just didn't understand what it meant. I trusted my son. Willingness isn't the same as informed consent, she said. Especially with family, do you have copies of the transfer? Any letters, emails, notes? I do, I answered. I have quite a bit. Good, bring everything. If your son ever promised verbally or in writing that you could live there for life, that matters. Courts take those promises seriously. Would a verbal promise hold up? I asked. Sometimes, yes. Especially if it's supported by witnesses or patterns of behavior. I thought of James and Andrew, my grandson, who had overheard Gerald promising I'd always have a place here. I might have someone, I said, then come in. I have an opening at 3, bring every document you have. When the call ended, I sat still, the phone warm in my hand. My fingers trembled not from fear this time, but from something sharper, steadier. Resolve. A feeling I hadn't worn in a long while. By early afternoon, I packed a canvas grocery tote with everything. The deed transfer, letters, photos, even the old birthday card where Gerald had written, "You'll always have a home with us." I slipped the eviction notice inside too, its edges stiff and accusing. At 1:45 p.m., I stepped outside. The sun had found its way through the clouds, warming the porch boards James and I had once laid. My hip ached as I took the stairs, but I ignored it. Pain was just another passenger on this ride. I was still in my home, and I intended to stay as long as I said so. The law office looked like something from a magazine, shiny floors, glass doors, modern art on the walls. It all felt too sleek, too sanitized for the kind of fight I had brewing inside. Diane met me in the lobby, mid-50s, navy suit, sharp eyes. Her handshake didn't try to crush mine, it just held firm, solid, honest. "Let's get started," she said. In her office, I laid everything out like evidence at a trial. She read each document slowly, carefully. When she reached the eviction notice, her mouth tightened. "He served you this in person?" "In my kitchen," I said. She nodded. "That's going to look bad for him, very bad." Then she leaned back, hands folded. "Legally, the deed is in his name, but the law isn't just about ink on paper. If you were misled, pressured, or promised lifelong residency, we can challenge this." "And can we win?" I asked. She didn't sugarcoat it. "Maybe, it'll take time, but the moment we file, everything stops. He can't push you out." "Not legally?" A long breath left my chest, not hope exactly, but relief's first cousin. "I want to move forward," I said. Diane smiled, real, respectful. "Good," she said. "Then let's fight this." By the time I walked out of the law office, the sky had gone flat and gray, the kind that makes the whole world look like it's holding its breath. I stood on the sidewalk for a second, tote bag digging into my shoulder, watching people rush past me, heads down, earbuds in, moving like life was nipping at their heels. Nobody slowing down, nobody looking up, nobody imagining the kind of storm I had brewing in my chest. When I finally got home, the first thing I saw was Mallory's shiny SUV sitting bold as brass in my driveway. Of course it was. She always parked like she owned the place. I inhaled, squared my shoulders, and walked toward the porch. She was standing there, tapping at her phone with that irritated little scowl she wore like perfume. When she looked up and saw me, her whole face rearranged itself, tight smile, fake warmth. "Helen," she said, "I was just stopping by to what?" I cut in. "Check if I'd packed yet?" Her lips twitched, and for once she didn't have a snappy comeback ready. "I thought we might talk." "Funny," I said, unlocking the door. "Talking isn't what Gerald did." She stepped inside behind me again, uninvited, like boundaries were just optional guidelines she could ignore whenever it suited her. "Helen, this isn't personal," she said. "It's just practical. We can't hold 2 properties. Gerald has debts, the boys need better schools." "I needed better ones too," I said, turning on her. "When Gerald was 10 and James was laid off, we were scraping by. We had this house, a beat-up truck held together with prayers and each other. I didn't sell off my parents' land to make things easier. I made do. Times are different," she insisted. "No, sweetheart," I said, "people are different." She clasped her arms, trying to look offended, but honestly she just looked cornered. "I've hired a lawyer," I told her. "We're contesting the deed transfer and filing for a stay." Her face dropped like a bad poker hand. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack." She scanned the photos on the mantle, Gerald as a kid, Gerald at graduation, Gerald with Mallory at the wedding. I could practically see the gears turning. "You're really dragging your son to court?" "Drag," I laughed once, sharp. "No, dear, he dragged himself." For once, she didn't have anything to add. She stormed out, leaving the smell of her perfume lingering like smoke after a firecracker. Silence settled in again, but it wasn't the scared kind. It was the kind before a woman draws her line in the sand. The next morning, I was out back grabbing laundry off the line when I heard a car door shut. Andrew's old sedan, not the fancy SUV, parked by the curb like he didn't want to intrude. He walked toward me slowly, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, shoulders hunched like he used to when he was small and guilty about something. I watched him scan the place, the flower beds, the porch railing, the old oak. He hadn't been here in months, but he remembered everything. "Hey, Grandma," he said softly. "Hey yourself," I replied. "You coming to drop off more legal surprises?" His cheeks flushed. "No. I just came to see you, then get inside." He followed me in and kicked off his shoes at the door. Habit, respect, or both. I poured tea and he took 2 sugars, same as always. We sat at that kitchen table he'd done his homework at, the one he banged his cast against when he broke his arm falling out of that oak tree trying to impress the neighbor girl. He stared into his mug for a long moment. "I didn't know," he finally said. "About the eviction, about the deed, any of it." "I believe you," I told him. "I only found out because I heard Mom and Dad arguing last night." His jaw tightened. "She wants to list the house already." I blinked. "Already?" He nodded miserably. "They're meeting with a realtor on Monday." Of course they were. Why waste time when there was money at stake? "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know things had gotten this bad." "They hadn't," I said. "Not until now." His eyes lifted to mine, full of something raw and painful. "You don't deserve this." "No," I agreed, "I don't." He swallowed hard. "If there's anything I can do, anything at all, you're doing it right now," I said. "By being here." We sat in quiet for a few minutes. The kind of quiet that doesn't hurt but settles like truth in the air. Then he asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Why did you sign the house over to him?" I leaned back. "Because your grandfather had just passed. Because I was tired, not thinking straight. Because Gerald said all the right things and I wanted to believe him." Andrew nodded, fists clenching on the table. "I want to help," he said. "If this goes to court, I'll testify. I remember Dad saying you'd live here forever." He said it in front of all of us. "That could help," I said, though I'd already planned to bring his name to Diane. "No, Grandma," his voice cracked. "I mean it. I don't want you going through this alone." I reached across and squeezed his hand. "I'm not alone." He stayed for nearly an hour, helping me grab the rest of the laundry, tightening the loose hinge on the screen door, checking the pilot light like he used to when he was home on breaks. When he finally hugged me goodbye, it was longer than usual, desperate, like he wanted to fix something he couldn't fix yet. "You call me if anything happens," he said. "Anything?" And then he drove away, tail lights shrinking down the street like fading embers. That night I baked apple crisp, because I felt like it, because the house deserved to smell sweet instead of heavy, because cinnamon felt like armor. And sitting there with the bowl warm in my hands, the house quiet but not lonely, I felt something flicker deep in my chest. Not bitterness, not fear, but courage, real, settled courage taking root and refusing to leave. The law office smelled like lemon oil and copier heat, the kind of scent that made you feel something official was about to happen. Diane had cleared the long conference table and my file sat in front of her, thick now, fat with tabs, handwritten notes, highlighted pages. Evidence of a woman finally waking up. "I've gone through it all," Diane said, adjusting her glasses the way people do before saying something heavy. "And I think we have enough to move." "Move," I echoed, easing into the chair. "File for a declaratory judgment," she explained. "We'll argue that you had an implied lifetime right to stay here based on his verbal assurances, your decades of occupancy, and financial dependency between you and your son. We'll also claim potential undue influence regarding the deed transfer." I stared at the folder. It looked so small, considering it held the last 40 years of my life. "And that'll stop the eviction?" "It will," she said with confidence. "Once we file, everything freezes. He can't sell, can't list the house, can't move you out until the court rules." I exhaled, long and shaky. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was space. Space to breathe, space to fight. "I'll submit it today," she continued. "I'll have the courier deliver notice to your son's address and will request a temporary injunction." "Good," I said quietly. She hesitated like she was choosing her next words carefully. "Helen, he's not going to take this well." I'm counting on it, I said. A faint smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, though her eyes stayed serious. You should be prepared, she added. Cases like this stir up old wounds, families fracture over far less. I shrugged. We split years ago, this is just the paperwork catching up. When I returned home, the house felt different. Not warmer, not safer, but solid, like it had squared its shoulders right alongside me. I set the kettle on and sat in my favorite chair by the window. Afternoon sun slid across the floor, soft and gold like it used to be when Andrew was little and spent afternoons lining up toy cars in the sunlight. I opened the notebook I'd started days earlier, the one titled, People I Can Call Who Still Know Who I Am. I read down the list: Andrew, Diane, Lorraine, Mrs. Cates. Then I added one more: me. The phone rang at 5:42. I let it go. The voicemail was sharp, clipped, Gerald's angry voice strained through teeth. Mom, I got something from a lawyer today. What the hell are you doing? Call me back. I didn't. He called again at 7:12. I can't believe you'd go this far after everything I've done for you. Done for me? I nearly laughed. Then came Mallory at 7:40. This isn't helping anyone. We need to talk. Court. Really? I muted the phone and let the messages pile up like leaves in the yard. Around 8:30, I stepped onto the porch. The sky was deep black and scattered with stars, the kind of crisp night James loved. I breathed in the cold air until my lungs burned a little. His voice echoed in my memory. You don't fight with noise, Helen. You hold the line, quietly, until they realize you're not backing up. Well, the line had been drawn. And I wasn't moving. Saturday came bright and brittle. I stood in the garage wearing an old wool scarf, rummaging through boxes for the winter blankets. My fingers were stiff in the cold, but I welcomed the ache. Pain meant I was still here, still fighting. I pulled down a box labeled James' office and lifted the lid. Inside were old ledgers, screws, receipts, and tucked beneath them, a stack of letters, not bills, not forms. Actual letters, yellowed, folded, waiting. His handwriting looked exactly the way I remembered it. Neat, deliberate, slanted just slightly left, like he was leaning in to tell me something gently. I sat on the workbench and opened the first one. October 14, 1992. Helen, if you're reading this, it means I finally made it up to the lake by myself like I promised. I smiled. He used to swear those solo fishing trips cleared his head, even though he usually came back with more stories than fish. I don't say it enough, but this house, you made it home. I built the walls, sure, but you built the days. If anything ever happens to me, stay here as long as you want. It's yours, no matter what the paperwork says. My throat tightened. I opened the second one, a hurried note written on a napkin. If Gerald ever tries to claim this house is his, remind him who scrubbed the floors and paid the bills and cooked every damn dinner. Remind him of you. It wasn't legal evidence, not exactly. But it was truth. A man's truth. And sometimes truth is heavier than proof. I tucked the letters into my blue folder for Diane, not because they'd win the case, but because they reminded me why I was fighting it. That night, insomnia wrapped around me like a cold blanket. I pulled the old family album from the shelf, the thick one with the cracked spine. There was James holding Gerald on his shoulders, both of them laughing so hard their eyes disappeared. Gerald at 7, holding a fishing pole twice his size, no fish in sight. Me in the background, flower on my apron, always the steady one. Then Gerald grown, Gerald married, baby Andrew smiling at something just off camera. Christmas lights blinking behind them. I stared at those pages until the edges blurred. When had the warmth drained from his face, or had I missed the slow fade? I closed the album and let the silence answer for me. You gave everything. And now you're choosing not to give the rest. Lorraine showed up Sunday afternoon. Her hair was whiter, her walk stiffer, but her presence, same as always, strong enough to fill a room. She carried banana bread wrapped warm in foil. I baked it before the bananas went black, she said, pushing past me gently. You know my rule, don't wait for things to rot before you use them. We sat in the living room, tea with no sugar, just like we did in the break room of the old laundromat in 76. So, she said, tearing off a piece of bread, Gerald finally showed teeth. I didn't ask how she knew. News travels its own highway in small towns. He did, I said. And you're fighting? I am. She nodded like she'd been waiting years to hear that. Took you long enough. I didn't flinch. I don't mean that cruel, she said. Just the truth. He's been taking little pieces of you for years, birthdays. Favors, money, one quiet yes at a time. I'm his mother, I said. No, she corrected softly. You were his safety net and he's finally decided he doesn't need the net. I stared down at my cold tea. She leaned forward. What are you scared of, Helen? Losing him. She didn't blink. You already did. It hit hard, but true things usually do. You made yourself small for them, she said. Now they want to fold you up and put you somewhere convenient. I swallowed. She reached into her purse and unfolded an old flyer, our charity bake sale from '89, my name listed as coordinator. You used to run things, she said. You still can. We were quiet a long time, then she stood up and pulled on her coat. Don't waste your fight being fair to people who haven't played fair with you in years. Use it for you. Take your life back? She left the banana bread on the counter and walked out. The door clicked softly behind her. I stood there, hand on the knob, and whispered, okay. The notice taped to my door said I had until noon. Noon, like I was some rental they could swap out between lunch breaks. At 8 a.m., I made myself coffee and fried the same 2 eggs I'd cooked every Tuesday for 20 years. I didn't pack. I didn't even glance at the cardboard boxes Gerald dumped in the hall last week, lined up like little gravestones, waiting for my defeat. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the steam curl from my mug. Outside, frost clung to the yard like it refused to let winter have the last word. The trees shook in the wind. Somewhere down the block, the garbage truck screeched, doing its usual rounds. Life kept going. The world didn't care it was supposed to be my eviction day, and honestly, neither did this old house. It creaked the way it always did. The pipes whispered. The windows blinked in the pale morning sun. Nothing about it felt like goodbye. At 9:15, someone knocked. I didn't move. Another knock, harder this time, impatient. Then the front door opened. Gerald had a key, of course. He stepped inside with that stiff posture he wore whenever he wanted to look responsible. In reality, he just looked like a man bracing for a conversation he didn't want to have. Mom, he called. In here, I said, not bothering to stand. He walked into the kitchen dressed in a wool coat and a face full of rehearsed lines. I came early. We should get started. I brought movers. I took a sip of coffee. They're waiting in the truck, he continued. If we start now, I can help you get settled into the apartment. I'm not going anywhere. His jaw twitched. Mom, don't start this. I've already started, I said calmly. He blinked. What does that mean? I opened the drawer beside me and slid a document across the table, a freshly filed motion from the court. Diane had sent it last night. The eviction's frozen, I said. Judge signed off. Nothing happens today. He stared at the paper like it was a snake ready to bite. What is this? You're the paperwork guy, Gerald. Go on, sound it out. He skimmed the first few lines, then looked up, color rising in his cheeks. You went to a lawyer? I did. He slammed the paper down. You're making a massive mistake. This is going to cost money, stress. Mom, do you even understand what you're doing? Oh, I do, I said. Clearer than ever. He turned toward the window, pacing. You could have just talked to me. I tried, I said, but you brought me a court order, not a conversation. He rubbed his forehead. We don't have time for this. Mallory expects the house to be cleared today. We already contacted a realtor. Then call them back, I interrupted. Tell them you jumped the gun. His lips thinned into a hard line. I didn't mean to hurt you. No, I said quietly. You just didn't mind if you did. The silence tightened between us like a rope. Finally, he folded the document and shoved it in his coat pocket. This won't stop the process, he said, heading for the door. It just buys time. We'll see. He paused in the hallway, eyes landing on an old trophy he'd won in 2nd grade, a dusty relic of a boy who used to hug me without being asked. You really want this to be how we end? He asked. You ended it, I replied. The minute you brought movers into my home. The door slammed behind him. I didn't flinch. A few minutes later, the truck engine rumbled and rolled away. The house was still mine for now, and today that was enough. 2 days later, the movers returned. Or rather, their truck returned. The men never stepped out. From my living room window, I watched Gerald talking to them, pacing like someone was winding him up by the collar. He pointed at the house, waved his arms, barked into his phone. Then finally, defeated, he dismissed them. They drove off without touching a single box. By then, the temporary court order had fully processed. The judge's signature was official. Diane called that morning. You're protected until the hearing, she said. Nobody touches the house. Nobody touches you. So when Gerald knocked again later that afternoon, I let him sweat on the doorstep for a minute before opening the door. He stepped inside cautiously as if the floor might bite him. I came to talk, he said. Funny, I said. That's what I wanted weeks ago. He stayed standing, didn't take off his coat. I didn't offer him a seat. This is ridiculous, he muttered. We're not enemies. No, I said. Enemies are honest. He winced. You really think I wanted to hurt you? I didn't bother answering. He looked around the room like he was seeing it for the first time. This is just a house, Mom, just pipes and drywall and a roof that leaks. You're wrong, I said softly. This house kept us alive. Every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every late-night worry your father and I patched up with our bare hands. I held his gaze. It's not the walls, it's the years. You can't live in memories. I'm living in dignity, I replied, and that's something you don't get to take. He inhaled sharply. Mallory's furious. She usually is. He didn't laugh. I don't know what happened to you, he said quietly. You grew up, I said, and somehow you forgot who raised you. He said nothing. You told me I could live here forever, I continued. You stood right here, this room, and promised. I believed you, foolishly, he swallowed. So what now? Now we wait, I said. The court gets a turn, you've had yours. He nodded slowly, his fists balled tight in his pockets. I didn't expect you to fight. I stood a little taller. That's why you lost the first round. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but instead he opened the door. Should I call later, check in? No, I said. If you need to ask, then the answer is no. He left quietly this time. Diane's office felt different the second visit, not because the room changed, but because I wasn't a problem on her desk anymore. I was a woman defending her ground. She handed me a thick folder. We're filing the affidavit today, residency rights, witness statements, the letters, it's all in here. I ran my fingers along the edge. You think we have a shot? She nodded. With Andrew's statement, absolutely. He was specific, dates, promises, details. He remembered everything. He's a good boy. He's honest, she corrected gently. After I left her office, I didn't go straight home. I stopped by a notary, updated my documents, and set Andrew as my power of attorney. Then I mailed a request to the county office to temporarily list me as the contact for property tax notices. Small steps, quiet steps. But they were mine. Back home, I removed the wedding photo of Gerald and Mallory from the mantel. No bitterness, just clarity. I wrapped it gently and placed it in a drawer. Then I opened my old financial ledger, flipped to a blank page and wrote, November revisions. Mortgage on self-respect, paid in full. At 4:10 p.m. the phone rang. I ignored it. It rang again at 4:27. And 4:53, still ignored. By 6 I was stirring soup on the stove, humming something slow and unfamiliar. Then came a knock. It was Andrew. Hope it's okay, he said, holding a small bag. I brought chili. I smiled. Good. I made cornbread. We ate like two people who survived the same storm, quiet, grateful, still standing. When he left, he hugged me tighter than he ever had. After he drove off, I turned off all the lights except one in the hallway. James always said, a house shouldn't go dark too early, it confuses the soul. So I sat in that single warm glow, breathing in the silence, steady, certain. I wasn't waiting anymore, I was preparing, and I sure as hell wasn't done. I found the envelope wedged against the storm door just after sunrise, paper flapping in the breeze like it wanted to run from the message inside. No stamp, no name. Just Gerald's rushed handwriting on the flap, the same sloppy slant he had in 6th grade. Inside, a single note, Mom, please stop this. You're tearing the family apart. The boys are confused. Mallory can't sleep. This isn't worth it. You knew the house wasn't meant to be permanent. Can we please talk before this goes too far? I folded the letter neatly, too neatly, and set it on the mantel between the candle holders. Let it sit there like a warning flare. Not for me, but for the quiet. The boys are asking questions. I could picture the whole scene, Gerald's dramatic sigh at the dinner table, Mallory rubbing her temples like she'd carried the weight of a nation, spooning guilt like gravy over the mashed potatoes. Grandma's confused. She's stressed. She's making a big mistake. But between all their stories, I was the only one telling the truth. At 11:32 a.m., the doorbell rang again. Through the peephole, Mallory. Dressed like she was on her way to a PTA meeting, I opened the door halfway. Hello, Helen, she said softly. I waited. She tucked her phone into her purse, rehearsed smile slipping. I don't want to take much of your time. I thought maybe we could talk woman to woman. You had that chance, I said, her shoulders dipped. I know, and I'm sorry, I didn't want things to get so legal. Gerald panicked. We thought you'd want something simpler. Something safer? You mean smaller, I said. She swallowed hard. I know it feels like betrayal. It is betrayal. She blinked like she hadn't expected honesty so blunt. Look, we've got 2 kids in school, a mortgage, a possible relocation, and I'm trying to hold on to what I already built, I said. Her jaw tightened. She stared past me, searching for a lifeline that wasn't there. Andrew's caught in the middle. It's not fair to him. He's telling the truth, I said. He'll be fine. You know how much this is costing us, she asked. Lawyers, delays, less than what you tried to take from me. Her lips pressed into a razor-thin line. Gerald thinks you're being vindictive? No, I said. I'm being extremely fair. She stepped backward like the porch was tilting. If you change your mind, I won't. And I shut the door. That night, my voicemail blinked. A small, nervous voice. Hi, Grandma. Dad said you're mad. I hope you're okay. We miss you. Thomas. I listened twice, not because I doubted him, but because I could hear the strings behind his words. Gerald always used other people when he wanted clean hands. I didn't call back. Love wasn't going to be a leash anymore. Later, in my bedroom, I opened the drawer filled with old Christmas cards. One from Gerald Reed. Thanks again for the help. Couldn't have done it without you. Another from Mallory. You're always so generous. We're lucky to have you. Generous, helpful, never essential, never irreplaceable, just convenient. But not anymore. The first unexpected letter arrived Wednesday morning. Tucked between bills and a farm supply catalog I never ordered. A small blue card with a pressed flower. Helen, I heard what's going on. Good for you. If you ever want someone to sit on the porch with, call me. Judy Cates, the one with the barking terrier. I read it twice, then placed it gently on the counter. Then came another, this one from Marka, a woman I'd helped with bookkeeping ages ago. You saved my business more than once. Your name's on the docket and I don't know what your son is thinking. But I'm rooting for you. Then a postcard from one of James's old coworkers. James always said you were the toughest one in the room. Looks like he was right. I placed them all in a basket beside my chair, not to brag, just to remember what it felt like to be seen clearly. On Saturday, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees when Judy herself walked up holding a thermos. Chamomile, she said. You seem like a chamomile gal. She poured us each a cup and settled beside me. I'm glad you're fighting, she said. You think I have a chance? I asked. She sipped. Honey, even if you don't win the building, you already won the truth. A laugh escaped me, a small, honest one. I used to think silence was strength. Judy nodded. Yeah. Until folks started using that silence like a weapon. We drank quietly, the wind rattling the gutters. Before she left, she squeezed my hand. No matter what happens, don't let them write the ending. Courtrooms aren't dramatic. There's stale air and bad lighting and carpet older than my marriage. Gerald and Mallory sat 2 rows ahead in stiff silence. Black outfits like they'd come to mourn something. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman with glasses dangling on a chain, reviewed the papers with steady hands. Mrs. Kirkwood, she said to me, you're claiming a lifetime right to reside in the home based on a verbal agreement. Correct? Yes, Your Honor. You signed the deed voluntarily? Yes. But your son assured you verbally you could remain there. He did, in front of my grandson. She nodded, flipped pages, then questioned Gerald. Mr. Kirkwood, did your mother believe she was allowed to stay indefinitely? He hesitated. I might have said something like that, but it wasn't meant to be permanent. Did you state any time limits? No, but it was implied. Implied in writing? No. Silence. The judge leaned back. Given the evidence, I find it reasonable to believe a verbal agreement existed. An injunction is granted. Mrs. Kirkwood remains in the home until the matter is fully resolved. My breath loosened. And she continued, I am initiating proceedings to review the deed transfer due to potential undue influence. She ended the session without dramatics. Truth didn't need a gavel slam. Outside, Diane touched my arm. You were steady, she said. I wasn't angry. You didn't have to be. Truth speaks just fine on its own. 3 weeks later, the final letter arrived. The deed couldn't be reversed. Too much time, too much red tape. But the ruling was clear. I had the right to remain in the house until my last day. No eviction, no sale, no force. A life estate by estoppel. I opened every window in the house and let the cold air tumble through. Not celebration, just honesty breathing for the first time. Gerald never called. Neither did Mallory, not even the boys, and strangely that hurt less than I expected. Andrew visited every Saturday. Brought groceries sometimes, peace every time. Judy and I made Thursday porch nights a tradition. I baked again, gave away half the batches. People wrote back notes, thanks, stories. One woman brought me banana bread and said, "My mother's fighting her own case now. She said if a lady named Helen could stand up in Carolina, she could too." "Tell her she's right," I said. Strength wasn't shouting. Strength was staying. That spring, I planted roses again. James's favorite kind, deep red, stubborn blooms. When the first bud opened, I touched the petals and whispered, "Still here." Because I was, because I am, because I stayed. If you enjoyed this chapter, make sure to subscribe to Grandma Stories, where every tale holds a heartbeat, a lesson, and a little bit of fire. Hit the bell, stay cozy, and never miss a story that feels like home.